Fantasy cinema has often been criticised for its conservative aspects, which often glamorises traditional traits of toxic masculinity while simultaneously alienating those who do not adhere to such traits. Zack Snyder's historical fantasy epic, 300, was met with such accusations, with critics accusing the film of vicious bigotry towards the Middle East and being propaganda for George Bush's ongoing wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. On the surface, 300 certainly fits the bill for an almost fascistic endorsement of racist and highly masculine violence, its warriors opposed to any form of life that does not adhere to the Spartan ideal of glory. From the very beginning of the film, the audience is bombarded with the disturbingly distant Spartan practices, where boys are taken from their mothers and are whipped into becoming the embodiment of stereotypical testosterone-fueled male fantasy. Perfectly muscular warriors who wish for death, the greatest glory a Spartan could wish for. There are fascistic parallels with the Third Reich, such as extreme nationalism and their perceived superiority to the Helots. They express homophobic views, boy lovers, and respond only with violence to opposition. In comparison, the enemy that they face consists almost entirely of turbaned and masked people of colour, which many saw as a bridging of the divide between ancient Persia and the present-day Middle East, displaying the enemy as modern anti-American Iranians and Islamic jihadis. Described as barbarians, often portrayed as sorcerers or grotesque monsters, the slaughtering of such endless waves of obviously racist caricatures was cited to be pro-American, pro-Iraq war propaganda, with the Ubermensch-style Spartan warriors as free men, destroying slaves from a land of mysticism and tyranny. What many scholars overlooked, however, is that 300 was worked on for 7 years, according to director Zack Snyder, a time in which politics merely caught up with the film. Therefore, the film's conception was never made with a political agenda in mind, and instead was merely a passion project to bring Frank Miller's artwork to life. The heavenly and angelic visual style, which inherently glamorizes the Spartans and their macho abilities, were inspired by the compositional styles of classic paintings. From the start, the intention was never to create a political film, but to create something faithful to the source material. Still, while the intention remains in the film's aesthetic, reality did intrude slightly, according to Snyder. The question can then be asked, why didn't he alter Frank Miller's work to suit a less problematic implication? Well, it's because Miller's graphic novel already provided the template to do so. 300 is a story inherently about propaganda. The character of Delios, revealed at the end of the film to be narrating the story that we see on screen, is essentially passing down a mythological tale to future soldiers sitting around a fire and telling them, before anything was written down, what happened at Thermopylae. We cannot trust what Delios represents, as everything he says is propaganda designed to hype up bloodthirsty Spartan men, making them, and by extension their questionable actions, more heroic. The barbarians and grotesque creatures that represent the Persian armies are not the result of an eyewitness report, but the product of his propagandistic fantasy. In Snyder's own words, Delios knows not to wreck a good story with truth. The Spartans are not supposed to be trusted. Leonidas' hateful hollering is lit and framed to be demonic and animalistic, while his arch-enemy Xerxes is mesmerizing, calm and collected in contrast. Indeed, the portrayal of the Persian god himself was scrutinized for being queer-coded, highly effeminate, even appearing seductive when trying to tempt Leonidas over to joining his cause. Yet he is not an unreasonable man, nor representative of a fanatical Muslim. Rather than wishing to exterminate Sparta, Xerxes wishes to share their cultures, offering Leonidas and Sparta wealth, power, and peace in exchange for submission. Despite his questionable methods, Xerxes is certainly not the savage that the Spartans would make him out to be, but is rather a threat to their inability to tolerate otherness. On the contrary, he embraces the disabled, the queer, and the outlandish, where everyone, even the deformed Ephialtes, is accepted. He is generous and he is kind, proving himself to be tolerant and lenient by continuing to offer his multiculturalist paradise to the Spartans up until the very end, only for Leonidas to respond with violence. Leonidas' destructive Western ideology is the monster here, not Xerxes. 300 is racist, homophobic, and toxically masculine, but only to a superficial degree. Under all the blood, screaming, and violence, the film displays an inner sentimentality that directly commentates on the cyclical effects of xenophobic propaganda, while simultaneously critiquing the very archetypes it upholds and supposedly glamorizes.
I have lived my entire life without regret until now. It's not that my son gave up his life for his country. It's just that I never told him that I loved him the most.